Alrighty, what is going on, you guys? It's your boy White Album here, and welcome back to another episode of Witch on the Holy Night. Last time we left off, we had the fight between Alice, Aoko, and versus Toko and Bayo. But I will be honest, I would rather not call these fights, considering Alice and Aoko got like one-shotted by Beowulf, which I'll be honest is kind of annoying. You know, like I think the only real fight we actually had was the fight between Alice and Aoko back in the theme park. And like timeline wise for on my channel video wise and like chapter wise, that was very early on into the game, so it's a bit annoying. So let's see what'll happen and this time around. So hopefully Aoko and Alice can do something to this kid. But you know, I don't think they're gonna go in that direction of like killing off a child. But TYPEMOON has surprised me before with some things, so I wouldn't be surprised. So let's get started. Let's get going. That's cool. I don't think I got my water going. Alright, now I think we're over with the boy Sojiro now. His heart was beating faster than normal. The fragmented and disturbing images kept returning, and he desperately pushed them to the back of his mind. They were thoughts that shook his resolve. He did his best to follow them away into an unseen corner of his consciousness. Right now, he can only focus on controlling his breathing and his exertion. Stay calm, he repeated to himself. He had not stopped for a second since leaving the church, even without giving a thought to what he would do next. So many traffic lights, so many people. It was Christmas. There was no way he could find a taxi. Waiting for one was not an option. It was why he had to put his trust in his legs. He dashed through the city streets. He had to find a shorter route than last night. His heart was ready to jump out of his chest, pounding like a hammer against a fire bell. He had no intention of giving up yet, but he could not seem to calm himself down. In his precarious condition, even surrender seemed too great of an effort to spare. Visions of horrible outcomes flashed through his mind. No, calm. He needed to stay calm. That was his only weapon. He was painfully aware he was powerless. The best thing he could do was to keep his head on straight. While he wrangled with his mind, his pulse seemed to quicken with every step. The forest was faintly lit by the moon. That was more than enough on such a bare mountain. He followed the two sets of footprints. Ahead lay a situation he had nothing to do with, just like at the amusement park. Even if you go, there's nothing you can do for them. The only effect her admonishing words had was to hasten his pace. He pushed the ground with his legs even harder, trying to leave his doubt in the kicked-up snow behind him. Of course he was powerless. The pain in his chest told him so. At best, he would be useless, and at worst, he would be a liability. Well, I don't know about that anymore, man, considering the two of them are laying on the floor right now. Blood pooling around them, so I would say that they're the liability at the current moment. He recalled the binding spell placed on him at the church. It did not matter. His body told him that he would regret being He would regret being torn to pieces less than if he did nothing. Not once did his legs fail him as he ran through the woods, though it felt as though his heart could at any moment. His weakness screamed at him from within. Just like back at the amusement park, he was beyond reason or circumstances now. Ultimately, I just want to help her. That was all he really desired. His heart pounded with vigor. As he ran through the dark, wintry forest, only one thing gnawed at his mind. Not concern for the girls, nor anger towards Toko. The red roses bursting forth from her limbs. Screams of agony, like childbirth. The harsh reality of something beautiful dying. The nightmare was tenacious. Never again. Never again did he want to see something like that again, if he could help it. Just ahead was the forest clearing. The moonlight shone on the old school building like a spotlight. Once again, those thoughts crept back. He cannot bear seeing something like that again. That's why he ran. But if he had to face it a second time, how could he stay calm? With that thought in mind, he arrived at the clearing. Somehow, his frantic breathing, his rising and lowering shoulders stopped. No exhaustion, no inertia, just blankness. Like his mind was frozen in time. This was the second time he felt like this. But the nausea and dizziness from the first time, the pathetic whining of the last few weeks, the doubts clouding his mind, they were all gone. Displaced entirely from his mind by even stronger emotion. His heart pounded with the force of a sledgehammer. It was a primal sound, loud enough to bring him to his senses. Sojiro stepped into the clearing, letting out a deep but steady exhale. Although his eyes were locked with the blonde-haired boys, his concentration was focused inward. Be calm. Be calm. Every fiber of his being worked to control his breathing. The clearing told of a story of Alice's and Aoko's crushing defeat. Aoko was lying face up in the snow, her right leg bright red and crushed at the thigh. Her eyes were glazed over, but Sojiro could tell she was still bravely fighting. Judging by her spluttering, she had taken a hard blow to her chest or back. Sojiro deduced it was likely both. Alice's injuries seemed less serious than Aoko's, but she lay motionless on the ground nevertheless. She was lying across Aoko, face down in the snow, arms out in front, as if though pushing herself up was too painful. Before the old school building stood the figure of the mage he had seen before. Paying her no mind, Sojiro began to walk forward. Feeling calmer since arriving at the clearing, he advanced towards Aoko. Toko did nothing to stop him. No one noticed, but the faintest look of worry flickered in her eyes.
お兄さんもその人たちの仲間?
Are you a friend of theirs, mister? The child werewolf spoke amicably, confident in his victory, and perhaps also eyeing up a new meal. Sojiro ignored him and kept walking towards Aoko. My man's face changed like, motherfucker, don't ignore me. The complete disregard wiped the smile from the boy's face. Still, Sojiro carried on. The beast's feelings were the last thing on his mind. Once he reached Aoko, he looked down at her with a pained expression on his face. Strangely, he was at a loss of words. After a slight hesitation, all he could manage to say was,
なってないぞ、生徒会長。
That was a very polite, Miss President.
行く時ぐらい声をかけるものだろう。
You shouldn't have left the church without saying goodbye. His awkward remark was half scolding and half affectionate.
このバカ。
You numbskull. Despite the pain in her stomach, Aoko was able to throw an insult his way.
安心した。余裕あるじゃないか、青崎。
Glad to see there's still some fight in you, Aozaki. His voice brightened, as if buying her bravado. The truth that she had barely any strength to live. Despite that, Sojiro looked like he wanted to respond in his usual way. I don't know why I said it like that. Something like, see, Aozaki? You're too tough to die, even when someone kills you.
あんた。
You know... As soon as she tried to speak, she ran out of breath. Sojiro heard her loud and clear this time. He might have looked absent-minded, but he knew exactly how dangerous the situation was. Aoko knew because his carefree sounding words did not match his expressionless face. Hey, look at that. No, the last time I seen that face was when he fucking was talking to Toko.
何のつもりで?
What do you think you're... Before she could say doing, she coughed painfully. Sojiro pressed his finger to his lips and nodded. Aoko could not quite believe it, but it looked as though Sojiro had gestured her not to speak.
だってほら、状況はあの時と一緒だ。
Isn't it obvious? It's the same as last time.
君がやられたら、次はこっちの番なんだろう。だから協力をしに来たんじゃないか。
If you go down, I step in, right? So I'm here.
まあ、何もできないのも、あの時と変わってはいないんだけど。
Okay. I still can't do anything, but still. Aoko did not know what to say. She could only look up at him, amazed and awed. The werewolf stared at them, visibly frustrated. After all, he believed himself to be the noblest of all creatures. Ignoring him was treason, punishable by death. Had Toko had not been there, he would have sunk his teeth into Sojiro's neck by now. He was sure he had been intimidating enough. However, his prey did not show him any signs of fear. It was hard to imagine, but maybe, just maybe, this guy did not view him as a threat.
まあ誰でもいいんだけど、筋張った肉は歯ごたえがあっていいし、何より食い出がある。
Well, whatever. As long as the meat is tender, juicy, and filling, I don't care whose it is.
先にそのお兄さんから始めても構わないよね。
Hey you, you don't mind if I start with you, do you? The boy wolf called out once again. Still not responding, Sojiro raised his hand to his nose. Calm, cool, and collected. Paying no mind to the boy, yet keeping an eye on him.
匂うな。
Something reeks.
ん？
Everyone present was confused. No one seemed to be able to smell anything but him.
へえ。何が匂うっていうのかな、お兄さん。
Oh? And what do you smell, mister? Bale's wolf retained his usual arrogance, but it was tinged with impatience. The boy was unable to hide his irritation at being ignored. Finally, Sojiro turned to face the boy with a short disdain... what? I almost said disdain. Just a short distance from him. There you go.
品のない肉の匂いがする。これだから犬は嫌いなんだ。
It smells like rotten meat. This is why I hate dogs. His voice was filled with disgust and contempt. Sojiro was mainly speaking to himself, but the werewolf boy had never felt so insulted. Even if that was not Sojiro's intent at all.
Huh.
In a moment, the wind picked up, perhaps signaling a change in the werewolf's mood. A fiery gale whipped around, carving patterns into the snow.
Sojiro!
Sensing he was about to be killed, Aoko desperately tried to move, but her broken body would not respond. After hearing Sojiro's insult, Alice was unsuccessfully struggling to get to her feet too. In complete contrast, Sojiro stood there, firmly and unfazed. The little blonde boy's well of patience had run dry.
そうか。要するに、僕が子供だからって舐めてるんだね。お兄さんは。
I get it. You're underestimating me because I look like a kid, huh? Big mistake. His time playing human was over. In rage, the boy transformed. He grew larger and larger, golden fur sprouting from his pale flesh. His mouth grew razor-sharp fangs. His hands grew claws. Drawing from the magical energy in the air, he transformed into a preternatural beast, a wolf in the shape of a human.
重化の許しは出していないぞ、ベオ!
Beo, did I say you could transform? Toko yelled at him, but the werewolf did not respond. He only huffed deep breaths of hot air.
そんなバカな話が。
Did you really just... That was all Sojiro could say in response to the boy's metamorphosis. Such a transformation was the stuff of nightmares. What was worse, the beast now towered above him. It was enough to make anybody question reality itself.
驚いた。
Amazing. Seeing his prey's reaction satisfied the werewolf, and his mouth twisted into a satisfied grin. He was a strange one, this guy, but meat was meat. However, Sojiro gonna pull something out of his fucking sleeves? I hope so, man. The beast's arrogance was short-lived. The prey breathed a sigh of exasperation before speaking.
それじゃあ本当に犬そのものじゃないか。
You really are a dog. You could hear a pin drop, even in the snow. Aoko, Alice, and Toko were all dumbfounded. Were they really seeing a human not stare a werewolf down, but insulted to his face? They simply could not believe it. Oh, my boy's tilted. This man is big mad, or this kid is big mad right now. It was too late. Any trace of the wolf's pride or dignity faded away. The onlookers finally realized that the wolf was serious.
Beo, 殺すな!
Beo, do not kill him! But Toko's command fell on deaf ears. The wolf prepared to lunge, his emerald eyes fixed on Sojiro not 30 feet in front of him. A mere 30 feet. A half second was all he needed. Another half second would bring his claw down and slice his prey from head to toe.
死んだよ、お前!
You're dead! A roar of joyous, unbridled fury echoed far and wide. It was the only warning the werewolf gave as he exploded towards Sojiro. 1 second. A golden blur swept forth in a furious gust, too fast for eyes to follow. In the face of unworldly speed, there was only one thing to do. Sojiro stepped forward, a silent shadow opposite the beastly silhouette of the incoming werewolf. He needed exactly 3 paces. He bet his entire life on around 3 feet of distance. In a blink of an eye, death would be upon him. Yet, he did not show the slightest indication he was intended to avoid the lunging behemoth. The wolf's forelegs slammed onto the ground with an earth-shaking fury. Bro, Sojiro gonna hit him with some Shoryuken type shit? That'd be crazy. His back muscles tensed up so much they seemed barely contained in his frame as he swept a raised paw downward. Sojiro's small step neatly evaded the claws, but he had a different motive. He was merely positioning himself for the next move. His intention was to never avoid anything. From the beginning, his mind was focused on but one thing. One point to aim for. One mind. One breath. He picked the perfect opening in the torso. In the wolf's torso. The precise microsecond between contraction and relaxation. That one point alone was the crack in the dam of life. He punched the werewolf in his chest with his feeble human strength. Damn. There was a dull thud and a burst. God damn it, I'm like fucking up my words here. In a burst of blood. The twisted flesh and gore was all Sojiro's own. Oh, dude, wait, hold on. You're telling me Sojiro pulled some, hidden dragon type shit, punched him in his heart, and it just stops that shit? That'd be crazy. The werewolf's raised claw convulsed. From the insignificant impact, the beast's body was the first to collapse, then his spirit. There was a moment of utter incomprehension. The wolf opened his jaws to try and pull air into his lungs. Gasping, he began to topple forward. The slender figure slipped around his flank. The next blow pierced him like a spear. Ignoring his mangled left arm, the silhouette whirled around and drove his right elbow into the collapsing werewolf's back. It was another muffled impact. The second strike penetrated the exact same spot their first strike had, crushing the beast's heart. This time, the blood that flew into the air belonged to the gasping wolf. The werewolf fell into the ground, choking on his own blood. He did not get up. He showed no sign of life. Well, there goes the last werewolf of this generation. It was over. There was no remorse, no hesitation in that brief act of violence. I mean, that would make sense, right? Sojiro lived in the mountains, so he's a hunter, so he knows what he would... Well, not explicitly a hunter, but I'm assuming he's had to kill a wolf or two before to protect himself, so he kind of knows what he was doing. Besides, you know, destroying your own left arm, I mean, I don't think that was in the cards, but hey. The perfect, furious golden beast laid still. Fell in a mere 3 seconds. No sane person would have not bet on this outcome. His breathing calm, the victor stood over the fallen behemoth's body.
なんで僕が
I would say that's because Sojiro's got that dog in him, but he doesn't like dogs, so I don't know. What would my metaphor be now? But how? Even as the beast lay crumpled in the snow, he cannot grasp what had happened. His heart had ruptured, cutting the blood flow to his body and brain, leaving him helpless. That much he knew. If he were a normal creature, he would be dead. As it was, this was a trifling inconvenience. Once his heart was repaired, his body would heal as well. It was not as if he had been struck by magecraft exceeding his own magical nature. This was a little different than a grazed knee. Which is why it was so strange. Your heart does not stop from a grazed knee.
思い出さないと
What did I do wrong? The werewolf frantically searched his memory. He managed to remember right up until the moment he raised his claws. But what had come after that? Given the right transformation, he knew he could withstand even a cannon blast. How had a puny human dropped him? Wait. Before that, he had to figure out exactly what his opponent did to him. The moment he got close, yes, he had felt a small impact. The attack was so accurate that it probably only affected his heart. Ridiculous. Even if it was possible, there was no way that alone would stop a werewolf's heart. In the end, no matter how much he thought about it, nothing added up. The answer was out of reach for a werewolf with no knowledge of being backed into a corner, let alone the limits of human skill. Only one thing was certain. He had lost. He tried to piece together the sequence of events. The explosion in his chest, the flash of white. After that, as he was falling over, he took another blow to his back. That was the one that disrupted his heart.
ふざけてるそんなことで僕が
This can't be. There's no way I could lose? Indeed. It was physically impossible. The boy gnashed his teeth and tensed his body with indignation at this unfair conclusion.
そうだ
Like he's not a fucking werewolf?
嘘だ
What?
同族でだって僕を任せる奴はいなかった
Not just a werewolf, like the perfect one, too? Oh, I know. None of this is real. No other werewolf even ever managed to lay a claw on me.
こんな痛みもこんな事態も全部嘘だ
This pain, this whole situation isn't really happening.
不合理に狂っている
It just makes no sense.
だってこの僕が 他の生き物に負けるはずが。
Who on this planet could beat me? Enough thinking. He was ready. From the ground, he glared at his enemy to his side.
負けるはずが。
I don't lose. The very next moment, an unknown type of pain coursed down his spine. It had eyes, cold eyes, staring, piercing, colorless. The moon looked more alive. Its arms were broken. Its inhumanely powerful attack had mangled them beyond recognition. If it was in pain, it would have cried out. But it was silent. Was it ever alive? I like the what's it called with the words there, how they're read. That's pretty cool. Those dead eyes. He had seen eyes like this before. Those eyes without hatred, without joy, without any feeling behind them at all. It was a mindless insect. The werewolf's hair stood on end. What was this creeping chill crawling up his spine? Having never experienced fear, the werewolf did not know what had become of him. Despite countless clashes against other mystics, it had been a human that broke him. He knew beasts even larger than himself. He knew legendary creatures like himself. He did not know this. He never met, much less imagine, a human-sized bug. The chill down the werewolf's spine was so vicious it threatened to split him in two. If he moved even an inch, it would crush his skull underfoot. In spite of the despair gripping him, the boy paradoxically sensed that his opponent would not move at all. This human would exhibit no further violence. It was a creature, no. A stone that held no animal instincts. It masqueraded as human. The contradiction grated against his heart, his values. A phantom pain born of an unknown emotion. Fear. It wasn't just grating. It was like many needles slowly digging into his heart. This had been his first taste of doubt, of reality. Such contradictions existed in the world after all. There were... irrationalities. I'm stupid. I was like, what am I reading? And questions you did not want to hear the answers to. It hurts. The suppressed pain suddenly flowed from his body like a raging river. This was also a first. Until now, he had always been able to control pain. He had never known what it was like to tremble. An elemental might have even felt sorry for him if it were here to watch. How sad. Born complete, yet lost in the lunacy of the human world. It hurts. It hurts so much. His heart had fully regenerated. Howling in mental agony, the beast clutched his own trembling body. Those eyes. Those human eyes looking straight through him. And then, the boy realized the only reason he was still alive. Even with both arms broken, the human could have finished him off with his legs. But it mattered not, because his opponent was giving him a taste of his own medicine. This was not revenge for trying to kill him. This was revenge for the wounds he inflicted on the girls. The absurdity of it all made his throat tighten. His breathing was frantic. This human had no sense of self. It had no concern for its own safety when it stood between him and the girls. That must be why it had no hate or fear, or perhaps even intent to kill him. Indeed, the fact that he was still alive had nothing to do with the human's will. The fight was machine-like, so was judgment. Eye for an eye, and nothing more. If the werewolf had killed one of the girls, this exchange would have ended differently. If I had killed them, would I have been killed? He shuddered at the thought. He had never entertained such a possibility. He had never had to, because he was supposed to be the one exception to that rule. Agony kicked him hard in the gut. No matter the mystic, nothing was immune from injury, from decay. The boy finally understood an obvious law of the world. Or rather, he had been taught. He would have killed me. I know it. Those eyes, they would not stop staring down at him. Retribution was a universal law. He was not painfully aware of that fact. And yet, the one who brought form to this idea was this human. The pain of defeat, the pain in his heart, the pain of comprehending the incomprehensible. Pain. The impossibility of it all has shattered his perfect world. It ate at him, consumed every fiber of his being. The doubt made his head spin. It was too much. Humans were impossible to understand. I have been killed. I had been killed. I have been killed. He had not been made to face the death of another, but his own. Unable to cope, he reverted to his human form. Quietly. He shivered like a frightened child in a mother's lap. I told you they would fucking kill a kid. I told you that shit was gonna happen. I was like, if I know TYPEMOON, they're not afraid to go this route. I mean, to be fair, this kid is a werewolf child that's lived for fucking centuries, so, you know. Still lying in the snow, Aoko choked on her words, unable to entirely comprehend what had unfolded.
Sojuro, anta.
She cannot hide the trembling in her voice.
Nani?
What? Speaking in his usual way, Sojuro nonchalantly turned toward her.
何って、今自分が何をしたか分かってんの?
Do you mean what? Do you even know what you just did? She shouted angrily, as though he had done something wrong. Sojuro looked surprised, wondering what on earth he had done to upset her. He lowered his gaze back to the wolf boy. Knitting his brow in dismay, Sojuro finally realized what Aoko was referring to.
心外だな。青崎は分かってると思ってた。
That's weird, Ozaki. I thought you knew. He looked at her in disappointment.
分かってるって何をよ?
Knew? Knew what? What the hell are you talking about? Feeling slightly affronted, Aoko responded curtly. Sojuro sighed.
山じゃ、熊はそう珍しいものじゃない。
Bears are pretty common in the mountains.
以前、確かに言ったじゃないか。
Remember me telling you that?
は?
Aoko's jaw dropped. It took her a moment to process what he had just said. She recalled some meaningless conversation, or another from who knows when.
君、もしかして俺をバカにしているのか?
Is he making fun of me?
まったく。なんで熊を倒すためなんかに修行しなくちゃいけないんだ?
Don't be ridiculous. Why would anyone train to fight bears? Yes. Now she thought about it. They had spoken about that. He'd mentioned being familiar with large beasts. And she couldn't deny that she heard him utter some anachronistic nonsense about training to deal with them. Which meant he was used to dealing with animals larger than himself. If he had lived the sort of life that involved run-ins with wild bears, then a man-wolf might be the only only been surprising, but not particularly frightening. Aoko hung her head. After all this time, who was it that really made no sense?
参ったわ。あなたの勝ちよ、宗十郎。
Okay. You win this one, Sojiro. He was like, yeah, that's cool and all, but my arm is it's no longer in use. We're gonna have to amputate this. It was hard to tell whether she spoke in admiration or exasperation. Either way, as she slouched in the snow, Aoko spoke quietly enough so she could only hear her words. Toko, on the other hand, understood exactly what had transpired. Bayo lay fallen, now just a sobbing boy, and another boy stood over him with two shattered arms. Near fatally wounded, Aoko and Alice still could not stand, but had recovered enough to breathe. As for Toko, she only had a few tricks up her sleeve, maybe 3 or 4 more runes at best. The magic crests on her back were unusable. She could use the remaining magical energy from the field imprisoning her grandfather, but that would be stupid. If she released her grandfather, she would lose ownership of the sacred ground. Failing to defeat Aoko and Alice now would mean starting over from square one, and she cannot afford that. The sibling rivalry had to end. Toko had gambled everything on her surprise attack. Using the fact that she was still in Alzaki to infiltrate Masaki's defenses. For 3 years she had labored, selling her work to the association. And she had used 20 years' worth of hair to immobilize an army of familiars. It was now or never.
だが、私は失敗した。
But I failed. She had overestimated the werewolf's power. It should have been enough. Yeah, that's what happens when you rely too much, or rely on something too much there. Against mages alone, Beowulf by himself would have been enough to ensure complete victory. But things did not always go according to plan. Beowulf's incredible strength was conditional. She knew he was not infallible, so why hadn't she prepared a contingency plan? Her heart as cold as ice, Toko stared at Sojiro, who stood tall. His arms were a hideous mess. The arm he used to strike Bayo head-on barely resembled an arm. His bones were bent out of shape, his muscles were torn to shred. To say his arm was simply broken would be a gross understatement. Streams of crimson ran down his other arm into the white snow. The elbow he drove into Bayo's back was likely shattered, and his muscle and tendons torn up to his shoulder. Judging from the state of his arms, it was doubtful he would be able to use them again. Worse than his arms were his left leg, and no doubt his internal organs too. He had used his left leg to take the full brunt of Bayo's charge. At a glance, it looked fine, but it was just now a useless hunk of meat attached to his torso. His insides were worse. Supporting the weight of Bayo had ruptured his spine, causing widespread internal bleeding. God damn, really? Basically, he was a dead man standing. A bird with clipped wings. Hey, they're using that analogy again. Living like that would not be living at all. He could barely stand, let alone fight again. In contrast, the collapsed werewolf was unscathed. He only coughed up blood. The majority of the pool of red on the snow was Sojiro's, a crimson tapestry telling the story of the boy who stood strong and defeated a werewolf.
当然だ。衝撃には反動が伴う。
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
拳を振るうのなら相応の負担がある。まして相手は人狼。
You strike, and you face the consequences, especially if you hit a werewolf.
走ってくる鉄の壁を真っ向から殴るようなものだ。
It would be like punching a moving freight train.
それを。
Did he? Perhaps he had known what would happen. Animals instinctively limit their strength in order to protect their body. Compensating for physical weakness with intellect and technique was humanity's forte, and that clash had shown humans at their very best, and yet, it had also been beyond human. He had attacked with no concern for his own safety. Without self-preservation in mind, he could go beyond human capability, enough to strike through the steel-like fur of a legendary werewolf. But who would have thought that a beast, able to withstand a shot from a tank, would be felled by a mere human?
いや、違う。
No, that's not right.
ためらうことなく殴りつけたから壊れたのではない。
The boy didn't break because he struck without hesitation.
初めからあれは壊すことを前提にしていたな。
He struck knowing he was going to break. He sacrificed his entire body to destroy Bayo's heart. Toko felt a chill come over her as she went over in her head what had transpired. It should have been a nightmarish scene. But she was captivated by the supreme display of physical rationality. From the outside looking in, she had witnessed not an accident, but a rational consequence. From that instant, the boy had put his entire being into piercing Bayo's chest. As soon as he laid eyes on Aoko and Alice, he committed himself fully to the task. He sized Bayo up, synchronized his breathing, found his weak point, and calculated the exact position, timing, and distance he would need to hold his ground. He knew what he had to do to win, and did it with everything he had. It had nothing to do with instinct. A wild creature would have not tried to beat something it could not. Only a human would risk his life when faced with the impossible. The contradiction fed his attack. He twisted his body, from his heel to his neck, to focus his energy. If Bayo had simply tried to run Sojiro down, their werewolf would have probably won. But the beast wanted to rip him to shreds. Or rather, he was baited into doing so. After Bayo charged, he planted his feet. He raised his claw, then swung downward, putting himself off balance. His pulses were erratic, his movement wild. In that moment, he was vulnerable. That was when Sojiro made his move. The beast had overwhelming power, but it was sloppy. Whereas the human concentrated all of his meager power into a single point. That was how the human shifted the balance into his favor. The follow-up attack would have ruptured Bayo's heart. It was a graceless second strike. A sloppy blow, no different from Bayo's. The elbow was only able to penetrate the beast's golden fur because of the first attack to his chest.
あの時点でベオは丸裸にされていた。
It left Bayo wide open.
無敵の人狼がその機能の一切を休止させられた。
Took away his invincibility for a split second.
つまり
Basically. The strike was not meant to break, but to disable. All living creatures had a weakness. No matter how strong the creature, it had weak points and weak moments. Not just physically, but mentally too. A time when they aren't in their best shape, unable to focus or find motivation. Sickness, or lack of sleep or food, for example, could cause the body's rhythm to go out of sync. For a variety of reasons, intelligent beings risk losing their ability to function properly. Legendary beasts were no exception.
弱点、欠点をつく魔術なら知っているが、すべてを投げ打って弱点を生むとはな。
Weaknesses. I know some magecraft that targets weaknesses, but I've never heard of a technique that risks everything to create a weakness. The boy's strike to the heart was not an attempt to kill Bayo. It was designed to create a weakness in something that had none. The elbow attack took advantage in that break in Bayo's invulnerability.
加えて、笑えることに不意打ちですらない。
Laughably, it wasn't even a surprise attack.
ベオの神経の伝達速度なら、毒が当たった瞬間に感知し対応できる。
With Bayo's reflexes, he should have been able to react.
だが、そもそもそれを毒と認識できなければ、変形のしようもない。
But he didn't even realize he was being attacked.
毒ではないものが毒になるなんて落とし穴を、誰が教えてやれるものか。
How do you teach that even something non-threatening can be a threat? She was frustrated, to say the least. The boy was totally committed, utter selfless. He bet his life on that single moment without expecting a single thing in return. The boy had acquired the experience and skill to do such a thing. It was not a miracle of luck, nor a miracle of passion. It was not tenacity, or hatred. Without constant, intense training, no one could destroy their own body on a whim like that.
子供には相手が悪かったようね。
He made a poor opponent for a child. Seeing Bayo cowering in the snow, Tucko was disappointed in her own lack of foresight. She had used him for his talent alone, ignoring his inexperience. If Bayo was not a child, his life experience might have given him the strength to bounce back and devour Sojiro after regenerating.
ベオを責めるべきか、それとも君を評価すべきなのか。
Should I scold you, Bayo, or praise you? Tucko quietly lifted her left hand. Nobody noticed. Standing far away, the boy standing looked like a hunter from a picture book. He had a slender build, but that was likely because he had intentionally shed any access. Given what she had just witnessed, his cluelessness had to be the part of an act, the act of a hunter. As she thought to herself, she suddenly remembered. The first thing that crossed her mind when they first spoke.
そうだったな。
I remember now.
だが、それは忘れていたかったよ、宗十郎君。
And how I so wanted to forget, dear Sojiro. No sooner had she felt a slither of sentiment, she returned to her unshakable resolve. She was raised as the heir to the Ozaki household, taught never to question the morality of her actions. That was why, even now, she knew exactly what she had to do.
でも、よかった。
Well, I'm glad that went fine. Sojiro muttered, unmoving perhaps because of the pain in his broken arms. He did not look at Aoko. Instead, his gaze was focused on Alice, who was lying prone in some way away. Aoko thought he looked lonely.
よかったって何がよ。
That went well. What did? She asked, spurring him on. They were mere steps from each other, close enough to touch hands. Their quiet voices carried in the stillness.
私たちが無事だったから、なんて言ったら怒るわよ。
Don't you dare say you're happy we're alive, or I'll be so pissed. She was not joking. Sojiro turned away from her, slightly shaking his head.
口にするのは3度目だけど、青崎の心配はしていないんだ。
I'll say it a third time, but I'm not worried about your safety, Aozaki.
いや、さっきはちょっと意識が飛んだようなんだけど。
You know, I could swear I blacked out back there just for a moment. He said, with an embarrassed smile across his face. The first time he outright fainted, but the second time, his passion pushed the dizziness and nausea aside. He just calmly did what he could do. What the hell? Fuck. I'm like reading too fast for my own good. He just calmly did what he could do as best he could. Nevertheless, no matter how calm he tried to be, deep within festered a very real rage.
じゃあ何が良かったのよ、宗十郎。
Huh. Okay, Sojiro, what is it you think went so well? Aoko's voice had a slight tinge of annoyance. Sojiro responded.
だって、ようやく約束が守れた。そっちだけが約束を守ってるのに、こっちは果たせなかっただろう。
Because I was able to keep my promise. You held up your end of the deal, but I haven't delivered yet.
それがずっと気になっていたんだ。その機会があって、本当によかった。
That's what's always bothered me. I'm so glad I got the chance to set things straight. His relief expressed itself as a small but heartfelt smile. Alright, when's this twist about to come in? Is it going to be like pierced in the back of the chest by some fucking magic spear? Because I think that's what's about to happen, ladies and gentlemen. Aoko listened, astonished. For a moment, she could not recall what promise Sojiro was talking about. When she remembered what he was talking about, what she had told him all that time ago in the amusement park, her mind went blank.
あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことは見逃してくれる？
If I agree to help you kill that thing, will you let me go? He proposed the deal, but in the end he had not been of any use. It must have been eating away at him at this entire time. Aoko had considered the agreement binding, but only for herself.
あんなどうでもいいことを。
You were worried about that? She muttered in disbelief. Sojiro gave a nod and affirmed with a tiny voice.
約束は自分のために果たすものだって教えてくれたのは青崎だ。
You're the one who taught me that promises are things you make to yourself, Aozaki.
だから君が守っている限り俺も守らないといけない。
So as long as you keep your word, I need to keep mine.
はあ、ずっと俺はそうしたかったんだ。
Whew. Well, what a weight off my shoulders. As if listening to a confessional, Aoko stayed silent. She cannot find the words to say anyway. Sojiro proved ever the enigma. Taking such a trivial promise so seriously and speaking so sincerely about something so basic. She could not wrap her head around how he had been a werewolf, but his personality. That was the true mystery. It was no use trying to figure that out now. To Aoka Ozaki, he was a riddle wrapped in an enigma wrapped in a conundrum. Man, that was a tongue twister to fucking say. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all.
それじゃあ借りは返したから帳尻はゼロだ。
So, I've paid my dues.
これで貸し借りはなしだぞ、青崎。
We're even now, Aozaki. Sojiro said lightly, perhaps attempting to break the silence. Normally this would have passed her by, but she saw his kindness for what it was.
貸しがついたのはこっちの方よ。
It's me that owes you one now.
これじゃあどうやって返していいかわからないじゃない。
I don't even know how to begin to pay you back, Alko grumbled. It's like, well, yeah, first things first is you could take me to a hospital because I'm getting slowly lightheaded here. Both my arms are beyond use and there's a lot of blood pooling around me. Sojiro nodded in happy agreement.
それより青崎の足なんか塞がってるな。
Anyway, your legs look a lot better.
もしかしてもう立てるのか？
Can you stand? She shot him a stubborn look as if to say, well, duh, obviously. Ever amazed by her grit, he offered her his right hand. Despite being broken at the elbow, to Aoko it looked as sturdy as ever. By all appearances, it was beyond recovery. It would be for the rest of his life. Even so, he seemed to be able to ignore the pain for Aoko's sake.
ほんと、あんたってバカ。
You really are hopeless. Are we just forgetting about Alice here? I think we forgot about her, man. She uttered under her breath, looking up at him. As much as she hated to admit, she could not refuse his hand. Resigned to herself, she reached out to Sojiro. But her hand never reached his. A small bell chimed. A line of wind whipped through the air. It cut through his waist like a guillotine. Called it. I fucking called it. Pieces began to fall. What were those things dropping before her very eyes? Aoko could not remember who they belonged to.
そちろ。
That used to be his name, right? The name of whatever lay in the red snow in front of her. His face now rested into the ground beneath her chin. The smell of viscera assaulted her nostrils. A river of blood flowed from what used to be a stomach. It happened so fast. Too fast for her mind to process, in fact. Her only solace was he preferably did not suffer. How could she think that so calmly, especially after what she had witnessed? Her blood boiled at her own stupidity. Which begged the question, how should she treat the one who did this? She had used all her anger on herself. She had none left to give to anyone else. But this hatred was hers, and hers alone. Her problem was this. Could she muster the emotions from the draught of anger? She was not sure, but the thought of hunting them down made her smile unconsciously in anticipation. Aoko turned to the old school building, to where Toko was standing with her arm out in front of her. She had used the same rune magecraft she used against Aoko and Alice, except Sojiro had no magical crest. Toko's amber eyes were narrowed, staring intensely at the fallen corpse. As to what she might have been feeling, Aoko could not care less. Even if Toko felt regret, Aoko could never forgive her for as long as she drew breath.
やはり君からこうしておくべきだったな。
I should have killed you when I had the chance. Toko was not speaking to Aoko, but to the dead body. There was no response, no cloud of breath. Coming to terms that he was truly dead, Aoko pushed herself up to her feet.
案外無様ね。
That was surprisingly gruesome for you. Facing her sister in the distance, Aoko spoke hoarsely.
でも正しい選択だわ。これで勝負はやり直しだもの。
But you made the right choice. Now, we can finish this. She turned away from Sojiro and stared at Aoko. They stood far apart. Farther apart than their positions made them seem. Though there was nothing left to say, the two of them exchanged words in respect of the fact that they were once sisters.
ああ、魔術刻印という私の切り札はこの通りで、人狼というカードもお前の切り札の前に敗れ去った。
This is such a cool scene. I love the artwork in this game. It's so good. Right. You've seen the aces up my sleeve. My magic crest. And the werewolf you trumped.
だが、そちらも刻印を使い切り、彼も今息絶えた。
I've used up all my crests, and your trump card's been torn to pieces.
互いに決定打はなくなったわけだ。
Stalemate.
そうね。私も甘かった。人狼が再起不能になった時点で、あなたが敗北を認めたなんて勝手に思い上がるんだから。
Looks that way. I suppose I was naive too. I should have known you wouldn't have accepted. Fuck. All right, let me just restart that. Looks that way. I suppose I was naive too. I should have known you wouldn't accept defeat after your werewolf failed.
本来ならそうなるんだけど、あなたがそんなに諦めがいいのなら、この町に戻ってきはしないものね。
If you weren't so stubborn, you'd never have come back to Masaki.
本当に甘かった。
I really was naive. It was clear to Toko that Aoko was trying to was trying to suppress her emotions. Aoko was right though. Her sister had counted on Beowulf to succeed. As mages, no matter what cards Aoko and Alice had in their hands, they were helpless against the werewolf. But then, Sojiro had shown up, and Toko couldn't win as long as he was around. Unfortunately, though he had stopped the werewolf, he had been defenseless against the mage. So, she had to kill him. With Sojiro out of the way, no one could hold Bayo back. It would take him time to recover, but as long as his wounds were only mental, that could be overcome. Alice and Aoko could try to attack again before he recovered, but Alice was being kept in check by the poison, so Toko still had the advantage. Stalemate, still. The battle would drag on. Unless Aoko were to use it. And I think we're about to find out what it is in the next episode. So I think we are close to the climax, man. You know, let's be honest, the way they were like when they set up Toko like talking to herself, and then they switched over to Sojiro and Aoko. I'm like, yeah, he's dead. It's over with. I saw that coming from a mile away. But that is going to be the end of today's video, you guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. This was a pretty exciting one, man. This had more action than like the last two fights that we had. So, it is your boy White Album. I will see you guys next time with the next episode of Witch on the Holy Night. Take care.